is set the net so wide that it will collect on organizations like the Doctors Without Borders, the International Red Cross, Red Crescent. Those were the two that I remember most, but I know there were others. And because we were listening to those conversations instead of blocking them from our system, which was possible, there were so many unidentified cuts that we never had time to get to. And I think that's part of the problem with our government casting the net so wide and intercepting such a vast degree and amount of conversations that there's so much stuff that just slips through the cracks. And that if we could kind of get back to the basics of trying to collect on the terrorists instead of American citizens, we might actually have the opportunity to collect more intelligence that would be of actual value.
At what point did you start shifting your eavesdropping from Afghanistan to Iraq?
To the best of my knowledge, the satellite phone system picked up basically satellites that covered a huge swath of the region, and so the way I remember it, basically, our mission was basically the entire area, Iraq, Afghanistan, and all surrounding areas for the entire duration of our mobilization. I do remember it shifting somewhat in focus from Afghanistan to Iraq, and this was definitely previous to our invasion in shock and awe. But as far as like an exact moment, I can't remember that for sure.
Can you talk about pre-war intelligence? What information you were getting, what you were translating as an Arabic translator?
Previous to 9/11, when I was on active duty, everything seemed incredibly legitimate. We were collecting military targets in the Middle East, relevant to our language. There was oversight. There were senior linguists who would go through and quality control our translations. There were specific guidelines. There was a lot of basic guidance and oversight as we worked through military intelligence. And I don't know if it was just a lack of having enough people, having enough guidance, if everything was just so chaotic in our military that all the rules basically went out the window after 9/11. But so much of that oversight and guidance, and we didn't even have senior linguists in our mission who could go through and quality control our translations. It was basically, a couple dozen reservists who were mobilized and basically put in charge of this new mission without really very much to any oversight throughout the duration of our mobilization.
You translated information for the Iraqi National Congress?
Yes, during the course of our mobilization, I think it might have been right after shock and awe, we received a fax. It was a multi-page fax, which as we began to translate it, we realized that it basically laid out the location of all of the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And due to the nature of the contents of that fax, as soon as we realized what the fax contained, that translation was sent via a critic report directly to the White House. And then we went through and continued to translate the fax and kind of send updates as need be. A critic, basically, if you find something that meets the critic criteria, then you have 15 minutes to relay that information to the White House. And that's what we did. And actually, when I first started translating this fax with my fellow Arabic linguists, for a moment, I thought maybe the administration was right, maybe our military was right, maybe Iraq did have all these weapons and they did have the intent to use them, and maybe the invasion was justified. I was against the invasion of Iraq. I was actually against the invasion of Afghanistan because I thought we were doing things for the wrong reasons. But when we started to translate that fax, I thought maybe I was wrong. And then it took me maybe like 10 minutes, and then I started thinking about the source of the fax and realizing that just because something is transmitted on a piece of paper does not mean it's true. And when I basically shared my concerns with our officer in charge, again, I was told that your job is to collect. You are not an analyst. that other people will analyze the information. You just collect and pass on, and that was always the guidance we were given. Shortly after I was demobilized, I was reading a news magazine, and I saw a little blurb where it said that we newly discovered that the Iraqi National Congress was actually feeding us misinformation. And I immediately, when I read that, thought to that fax and that critic report, and really wondered to what level that intercept had been used to further justify the invasion of Iraq. And doing research about the Iraqi National Congress since then, I found out that senior military advisors and analysts were actually trying to make the case since December of 2002 or previously that the Iraqi National Congress was not reliable. It was not a reliable source of information. And so why we would allow information like that to be passed on to justify this invasion, to the best of my knowledge, if you find out that a critic is false, then you cancel the critic. So by the time we ended our mobilization, my officer in charge said that our critic was one of the only critics that had never been canceled. And so even in August of 2003, people were still passing that intelligence off as valid. And meanwhile, come to find out, people knew for a long time that the Iraqi National Congress was not a reliable source of information.
Adrienne Kinne, we have to break again, but we're going to come back to you to finish up this conversation. Adrienne Kinne is former Army Sergeant, worked in military intelligence, served for 10 years from 1994 to 2004. When we come back, I want to ask why you have chosen to speak out. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We'll be back with Adrienne Kinne in a moment.
And the river opens for the righteous, 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 and the river opens for the righteous. Someday I was walking with my brother, and he wondered what's on my mind. I said what I believe.